Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Every single time you ask an AI a question or have it generate an image for you, you're actually relying on this massive trillion-dollar physical infrastructure. And today, we are unraveling a really wild supply chain mystery that's unfolding right now in that global AI hardware space. We talk so much about GPUs, data centers, and literally trillions of dollars pouring into AI infrastructure, but right beneath the surface, there's this hidden microscopic bottleneck that threatens to just completely choke the entire ecosystem.
Okay, so let's dive right into this. Back on March 2nd, 2026, NVIDIA announced a massive $4 billion investment, basically pouring $2 billion each into two specific companies, Coherent and Lumentum. And the goal there? To completely lock down the supply of highly specialized lasers for their next generation of AI factories. But over on the exact opposite side of the ring, we've got this unbelievable David versus Goliath contrast going on. There's Sivers Semiconductors. They're a Swedish company based in a suburb of Stockholm, sitting at a tiny $130 million market capitalization. So how on earth does a company that small fit into an arms race this incredibly big?
Well, that actually brings us to the central question of our explainer today. What exactly happens to the rest of the AI race when NVIDIA effectively just buys all the lasers? By writing those multi-billion-dollar checks, NVIDIA completely ring-fenced the production capacity of the two largest independent laser suppliers in the entire Western world. And that creates a massive, massive supply cliff for AMD, major hyperscalers like AWS and Google, and really just the rest of the non-NVIDIA ecosystem. Everyone desperately needs these components, and suddenly the queue is just completely full.
Which brings us to Section 1, the Market Avalanche, AI's Bandwidth Crisis.
You see, the sheer velocity of the co-packaged optics, or CPO market, is just staggering. Looking at forecasts from Yole Group, IDTechX, and Mortar Intelligence, you'll probably notice right away that the base numbers and the specific years are, honestly, all over the place. Market sizing for CPO right now is a little chaotic just because the tech is evolving so incredibly fast. But look at the growth rates. Whether it's projected to hit $8.1 billion by 2030 or push well past $20 billion by 2036, every single projection agrees on one critical thing. The trajectory for co-packaged optics is going absolutely vertical.
And that leads us to Section 2, solving the power wall, and exactly why traditional copper is dead. So for years now, data centers have relied on traditional pluggable modules. Basically, the optical module sits on the front panel of a switch box, inches away from the actual chip. But when you start hitting modern AI speeds, we're talking 800 gigabits and 1.6 terabits, sending an electrical signal across just those few inches of copper results in this massive signal degradation and power loss. It's an absolute power drain. Co-packaged optics completely solves this. By moving the photonics directly into the exact same package as the switch chip, you reduce that physical distance from inches down to millimeters. And the result? You get roughly 3 times better power efficiency. When you're out there running gigawatt-scale AI factories, saving that much power isn't just a nice luxury, it's a strict operational necessity.
Moving on to Section 3, the silicone laser problem, the challenge of that last millimeter.
So here is the really crucial point. The dominant manufacturing approach for co-packaged optics uses silicon photonics. Now, silicon is fantastic at routing and directing light, right? But because of its physical band structure, it's actually terrible at generating light itself. It absolutely has to have an external light source to function. And that is exactly where the DFB laser comes in. A distributed feedback laser is this incredibly precision-engineered component. But critically, it's not made from silicon. It's made from a highly specialized material called indium phosphide. You can't just outsource this to a standard commodity silicon foundry. It requires super specialized in-house cleanroom production. Honestly, it's like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. And without this tiny little photon factory, the entire terabyte optical data highway simply does not work.
Which sets us up perfectly for Section 4, the independent choke point, a tale of two ecosystems.
This choke point essentially splits the entire market right in two. First, we have the NVIDIA-aligned camp. Remember that $4 billion check from earlier? Well, that totally locked up Coherent and Lumentum. Their manufacturing capacity is effectively completely reserved for NVIDIA's ecosystem. Then you have literally everyone else. AMD, the massive hyperscalers, all the CPO startups. They all have to go out and find independent alternatives. And the primary options left standing are WIN Semiconductors, which is a private company in Taiwan, and Sivers Semiconductors. So Sivers basically stands alone as the primary publicly traded Western independent alternative that actually has the manufacturing capacity and the rigid customer qualifications already fully in place.
And hey, if you want proof that the rest of the industry is absolutely scrambling to secure this supply, just look at these market signal flares. Keep in mind, these are massive players relying on this tiny company. Ayar Labs, a major CPO startup backed by heavyweights like Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA, has literally listed Sivers as its primary laser supplier. Global Foundries specifically names Sivers as an ecosystem partner. Poet Technologies is actively collaborating with them for their optical interposer platform, and ONET just signed an OEM partnership with them too. The entire rest of the industry is actively pivoting towards Sivers just to secure high-volume laser supply for products like AR Supernova Module.
Now you're probably wondering, why can't other companies just spin up and start making these lasers tomorrow? Well, let's look at Section 5, Deconstructing the Moat, the 7 Powers Advantage.
Sivers is protected by some really immense structural advantages, which we can analyze through the famous 7 Powers business strategy framework. First up, switching costs. In this specific supply chain, swapping out a laser supplier isn't just a simple procurement decision. It's a grueling 12 to 24-month rigid engineering qualification cycle just to ensure stuff like temperature tolerance and long-term reliability. Once you're in, you are locked in. Second, we have a true cornered resource. Sivers actually owns an in-house cleanroom facility in Glasgow specifically built for deep indium phosphide manufacturing. That level of institutional knowledge and physical infrastructure literally takes a decade of investment to build. It's almost impossibly difficult for a newcomer to just replicate.
So when you combine that trapped industry demand with their competitive moat, you get this absolutely staggering number, $453 million. That is Cyber's opportunity pipeline as of 2025. And to really put that into perspective for a second, their total revenue in 2025 was only around $33 million. I mean, this just brilliantly illustrates the massive financial leverage and explosive growth potential sitting right there in front of them as the CPO market inevitably shifts from lab trials to full high-volume production.
Of course, it's absolutely vital we look at the whole picture here. Section 6, Risks and Fallbacks. What if CPO is delayed?
Now, just a quick pause here to explicitly remind everyone tuning in. This explainer is purely an analysis of the source material for informational purposes, right? It is absolutely not financial advice. Scaling a small-cap semiconductor company is always highly volatile, and there are some very real structural risks to this thesis. First off, CPO timeline slippage. Volume production for co-packaged optics has famously been, quote-unquote, 2 years away for several years now. If data centers decide to just stick with pluggable transceivers longer than expected, the whole timeline pushes out. There's also the constant risk of alternative suppliers emerging, or maybe some massive tech breakthrough in silicon lasers that could eventually bypass the need for indium phosphide altogether. Plus, scaling up a fabrication facility requires serious capital, and right now, Sivers does rely pretty heavily on key single customer concentrations like Ayar Labs.
But here's what's really crucial to understand. Sivers isn't entirely dependent on CPO timing. They actually have a massive fallback. In March 2026, they announced a strategic LiDAR customer that's going to begin ramping up production in Q4 of 2026, and that brings a cumulative revenue potential of $53 to $138 million. So that provides this really significant non-CPO revenue floor that helps completely de-risk the company, while the much larger AI networking architectures continue to mature in the background.
All right, let's bring it all together as we enter our conclusion, the race for light.
I absolutely love this quote from the source material because it just perfectly encapsulates the high-stakes reality of this whole photonics arms race. In the race to build AI at the speed of light, the gun goes off with the laser. NVIDIA bought the 2 biggest gun manufacturers. Sivers is quietly building every other weapon in the room. The critical bottleneck for the next generation of AI infrastructure isn't just about who has the best GPU anymore. It entirely rests on a tiny photonic component that very, very few companies in the world can actually manufacture.
Which leaves us with this final thought. As global AI infrastructure spending scales into the trillions of dollars over this coming decade, we really have to look past the giant data centers and those massive chips. Who actually holds the keys to the future? Because sometimes the biggest vulnerabilities, and honestly the greatest opportunities in our entire global supply chain, are hidden away in the microscopic details, like a tiny little sliver of indium phosphide manufactured in a clean room in Glasgow. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and